This is unprecedented. The show, I mean, and the things we're going to talk about at the United States Supreme Court. Dina, Sayegh, Doll, Michael Popok, you're at one place, the only place on the YouTube Doll where you can get unprecedented, and that is on the Legal AF YouTube channel. First, a quick shout out of congratulations to our audience, to our channel, to Dina, and those that contributed to the success here. We rolled the odometer on 500,000 subscribers in less than 6 months. That is as much to do with you as it does with us. I'm curating. I'm bringing on some great contributors. Dina's doing some amazing work here. You've brought unprecedented to your bosom. you like us, but it's about the engagement, and we have an engagement of an audience, and just how enthusiastic they are about what we do here, that I think is unparalleled. I don't think any other YouTube channel, I mean, they might get a view. A view is not what we have. We have this just tremendous, deep, abiding, two-way respect here. And it just makes everything we do, it just makes everybody here work hard, get up early, stay late, put in the hours, sit in the chair and do the work, and same on the audience side. So I really appreciate all of you, and Dina, you in particular, for being here from the beginning. We had 25,000 or less subscribers when you came aboard, and now look at us. So let's go to our agenda for today. Birthright citizenship, Donald Trump looking babies in the eye and telling them, you're not U.S. citizens. Is that really going to fly with the United States Supreme Court, given the 14th Amendment and the 100-year of precedent? And in a new filing that Donald Trump filed against 3 separate appeals, he's asked the Supreme Court for the same thing, which is to let his executive order ripping out the beating heart of birthright citizenship stand, block the injunctions that have stop that executive order from going into effect, and allow that block to stay in place for the duration of the appeal. And we've got a new development. We'll talk about the case, got a new development at the Supreme Court level, which I think our audience will find interesting, Dina. And then kind of buried within there is a bigger, broader brawl that we're watching break out at the United States Supreme Court. And in our national debate about the role of the presidency and the 3 co-equal branches of government and the checks and balance. In one corner, you've got Donald Trump and the Federalists and the right-wing MAGA Heritage Foundation, who believe in the 2 things. They believe, besides, mom, Chevrolet, and apple pie and baseball, they believe in the Unitary president model. We'll talk about that. And on the corollary to that is they believe that federal judges are powerless to issue nationwide injunctions. So they want a unitary president, but they want a disunitary or an ununified judiciary to oppose it. And everything we're watching, frankly, is just right out of the Project 2025 and Heritage Foundation playbook. We've got a decision by the Supreme Court to take up a case. They're going to hear it in the October term. Just to remind everybody, terms run from October until about April. But then everything else is just waiting on decisions and orders and emergency applications. Although I've joked, Dina, I don't think the Supreme Court should make faraway plans for the summer. So I think there's going to be lots of emergency applications because of this administration. But there's a new decision to take up something related to gender affirming therapy for a certain group in our society, and it's kind of scares the crap out of me when the Supreme Court decides to take that up, and we'll talk about that as well. And then there's yet another climate and environmental decision. Although again, we're having difficulty getting any kind of continuity of thought related to the Supreme Court. Last week we talked about, poo in your water was okay, raw sewage dumped into your drinking water was okay last week. And now we've got another environmental decision or climate decision that you'd think based on that decision, they would have went one way, and it looks like they went another. We'll break it all down for you on Unprecedented. First, let's start with Dina. Dina, how are you?
I'm okay. I mean, kind of dealing with some health issues with family members, but I'm just so glad to be here, and definitely congratulations to everyone who, does this with us. I think that Trump is just good at making noise, making it seem like things are confusing, distracting people. And oftentimes it's not confusing. But so I'm grateful that we can maybe give some clarity, because that, to me, I think may be the biggest antidote to what he does.
Yeah, absolutely. One of our contributors once said, you got to speak truth to each other before you can speak truth to power.
Yeah.
And I think we do an admirable job, and it's certainly where our heart is and our mind is, to talk about truth. Some of it's opinion. Obviously, we have points of view. I mean, if we didn't have a point of view and an opinion, we wouldn't have a YouTube channel. I mean, just if you want to just put a live feed of C-SPAN into your brain and figure it out for yourself, that's good too. I mean, I watch C-SPAN, but I mean, you're here because you've come to trust the judgment and the decision making that we make with our best judgment about what's going on and what we're watching, and then tie it together historically, from a precedent standpoint and otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
So let's turn to birthright citizenship. You want to frame how we got here, and then we'll talk about what happens next, like the three cases: Ninth Circuit, Fourth Circuit, First Circuit, because we just had the most recent one, like the third shoe dropped with the chief judge of the First Circuit sitting in Boston, Massachusetts. That led to this application to block all of the nationwide injunctions, and there are three of them. Why don't you take it from there?
Well, so this is, everyone's been following along with this, right? Because as soon as he issued this executive order, which I think we all now know basically was changing the qualification to become a citizen, that you had to be a child of parents that were here, documented citizens, right? And this is pretty blatantly against how our Constitution is written. So it was automatically enjoined by various circuits, as you just mentioned. And it's finally now coming in front of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has decided to take the case, which will mean that whether or not these injunctions become, let's say, permanent, and this executive order cannot will essentially be overturned, I guess you can say in that way, or not, will be decided once and for all. It's a little bit, I don't know if it's concerning or not that they take it. The Supreme Court takes cases. If, let's say, one circuit had decided to enjoin it and another circuit hadn't enjoined it, that would be a time when the Supreme Court really should take a case. They take cases where there's differences in opinion with circuits, because then you have literal different interpretations of the law, and they like to reconcile that. In this case, because every circuit decided to enjoin it, they could have done nothing. So with this Supreme Court, anytime they take a case, it's a little bit worrisome. And basically, as you said, there's really two big issues in this case in front of the Supreme Court, according to the Trump administration. One is they want to get rid of birthright citizenship. They point to the fact, we know that the Supreme Court case, back 100 years ago, with the child of Chinese citizens, the Supreme Court determined that he was a U.S. citizen. But it is true, when they were discussing that in their dicta, they point out the fact that the parents were, and let me just quote exactly what that says, had permanent domicile and residence in the United States. This was the case, the Wong Kim Ark. And the Trump administration is pointing to that language. At the time of the decision, they were not relying, let's say, their opinion wasn't relying on the fact that the parents were legal residents. They weren't citizens, but they had some legal documents, let's say, right? But the Trump administration is saying, because that was the facts at the time, you should interpret it that is what is legally necessary. The other thing, too, is, as we know, that the Heritage Foundation and all these conservative, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Thomas, Alito like to talk about what the founders thought, right? As if the founders truly thought about anything that was going to happen at this day and age. I mean, my goodness gracious, if we stuck with what the founders thought, I would have no rights in this country, right? But that's their wanting to do, the founders. And so the Trump administration, when they're trying to argue that there should be this legal requirement for the parents, quote, the Senator Trumbull in his speech he gave in 1866. So, for me, that seems, and we think this is kind of laughable that they have to reach that far back in order to justify the change of the law. But with some of these Federalist judges, that might be speaking their tune. So we have that issue. Will they kind of modify it, let's say? I don't think they're going to go as far as Trump wants, but I could see them possibly modifying it a little bit. And then the injunction issue. As we've talked about before, both administrations actually have wanted the Supreme Court to limit universal injunctions. The Biden administration wanted them to do that because a single judge was preventing them from enforcing their anti-money laundering. And when Biden was in office, us Democrats were really frustrated that Texas judge kept on making these injunctions that was affecting the whole country. It does allow for forum shopping. But in this situation, where we want judges to protect us from Trump, and we are hoping that they keep it. But I because of that inherent, let's say, both sides like it sometimes, very non-legal way to describe the conflict here. In January, the Supreme Court didn't want to take up the issue of whether or not injunctions were good or not. Gorsuch was the only one who said he wanted to do it. I don't think they're going to have a consensus this time around either, because it is, to undo it is going to have such big ramifications on both sides of the aisle. I don't think that they're going to come to an agreement on that. What do you think, Popok?
Well, I'll start with that, and I'll go back to birthright citizenship. Yeah, I think the nationwide or global injunctions or universal injunctions are just a function of the nature of the injury that's being proposed. I know the Heritage Foundation was like, well, if it's not a class action, they should only be dealing with the parties that are in front of them, so the 22 states or the 18 states. But what are you going to do? You're going to say in 22 states you're going to have birthright citizenship, but in 18 states or 28 states you don't? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's just certain things that the reality of having to give proper remedy and relief to the parties is akin to a class action. Lord knows MAGA and Heritage and Federalists loved universal injunctions during the Biden administration when they used them to their advantage to block reproductive rights for women, medicated abortions, Biden's immigration policies, Biden's COVID policies, you name it. And then, they did the Texas two-step or the Louisiana two-step. They go run into a Texas judge. They, one judge in the district. They get that one judge. And then that one judge issues a nationwide injunction. We just saw Judge Kaczmarek issue a nationwide injunction on mifepristone to stop medicated abortions, which is the 50% way that women, half abortions in America are by prescription that way. And nobody had a complaint about that. They were all celebrating in the streets. Nationwide injunctions are great. But when you're out of office or you're on the other side of them, you don't like them much.
Yeah, exactly.
Alito, Thomas, and Gorsuch hate them. Mm-hmm. There's always 3 votes to get rid of nationwide injunctions. Gorsuch has gone on a rant in various cases and in interviews where he has said things like, it is the bane of the existence. It violates Article 3 jurisdiction. It's both hasty, creates too fast, too quick, under record decision making, and I hate it. And sometimes he gets Alito to join, he gets Thomas to join. The question is Kavanaugh, Roberts, and Amy Coney Barrett. Why does this matter? It matters because when you have an out of control president, you need to have a judge have the power, jurisdiction, and balls to issue a nationwide injunction. Otherwise, we got to go to all 50 states,
exactly,
to file cases, which is ridiculous. We're already seeing there's already 3 overlapping nationwide injunctions involving birthright citizenship. 1 out of Washington, affirmed by the Ninth Circuit. 2 out of Massachusetts or that area, affirmed by the First Circuit. And 1 out of Maryland, affirmed by the Fourth Circuit. Some people might ask, well, why do we need so many? You only need 1. Well, no, you see the argument on the other side about it. So these groups are slightly different in who they represent. You know, sometimes it's federal workers, sometimes it's the actual, in this case, the pregnant people. Sometimes it's the public interest groups or whatever. And then they're trying to do, working sort of together, is come up with the best case, best record to have the right case up before the United States Supreme Court, which is where all these are heading. And so right now we've got 3 universal injunctions, all against Trump administration on birthright citizenship, on the exact same analysis, effectively. And now the Supreme Court's going to have to deal with it, not competing ones. I mean, procedurally, it happened to what I said was going to happen on an earlier hot take today, which is Kagan for California, Roberts for the 4th, and Ketanji Brown Jackson for the 1st, all referred it over to the full Supreme Court, and they didn't do their shadow docket, emergency docket method, where we'd get 3 different. They wanted to avoid 3 different Supreme Court justices ruling differently, and so they referred it over. What we got just now, before we went on the air, is what I thought would happen. Although I said it would be a quicker briefing schedule, and the fact that the court has ordered the 22 states and the other parties to file their opposition to the Trump application for this emergency block of the injunction. They've given them until April 4th, which is, it's like 3 weeks away.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to let babies be born and be U.S. citizens in the meantime.
Yeah.
For me, the length, I could be wrong. I want to hear your opinion. The length of time indicates to me they don't see this as an urgent thing, and they're going to let the 3 groups take 3 weeks to put their briefing schedule together and let babies born in the meantime be U.S. citizens. What do you think about that?
I think you're right. And I don't think that they're going to give the administration everything they want. I could see there being something maybe related to they talk like somebody temporarily in the United States being born. I could see them modifying it a little bit. But you're right. It shouldn't be urgent. It's the way we have functioned since the inception of our country, or at least since the inception of this amendment, the constitutional amendment that allowed the 14th Amendment. And back to the universal injunctions, I think another reason too why getting rid of it is kind of impractical in a way is because let's say you're in Florida, I'm in California, and your state has sued.
We can say that
because it's true. Your state has sued successfully that a child born to you, even if you are undocumented, is a citizen, but not for me, right? I think I have a really good due process claim in that respect, saying that the law is being applied unequally here because that same constitutional 14th Amendment is being applied differently to you and me. And so to me, if you get rid of universal injunctions, I think you end up getting a whole bunch of successful due process violations with it. Although I get it, I get the sentiment of why should that one judge necessarily make it especially when it's like a judge like the Texas judge. At the end of the day, the federal law is the federal law. And it shouldn't be applied differently regardless of the state you're in. And we have a mechanism. If different judges around the country interpret it differently, that's why we have a Supreme Court to resolve those differences. So I think it works as it does, even if people don't maybe like always the outcome.
Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett they've sided against universal injunctions on occasion, but they don't have a universal belief that they are wrong in every case. And that's what the reason, let's just call it out. Let's just pull the mask off. The reason that MAGA wants, in this case or in other cases, to get rid of universal injunctions is because it's a powerful weapon of the judiciary to fight against an out of control, megalomaniacal dictator in the making. Mm-hmm. So I've seen the Heritage Foundation articles from the first Trump administration where they say, unitary president meet unitary judiciary. They don't like the unitary judiciary. They want to divide and conquer. They want 50 states. They want 12 federal circuits. They don't, right? They want to play whack-a-mole. They don't want because,
Yeah.
For instance, you hear how Carolyn Levitt, the world's youngest press secretary, how she talks about, isn't that her title? That's what every time they mention Carolyn Levitt, they always have to brag about how young she is. And all I see is how young she is. And she gets fed these quotes. And I saw a quote today that she put out about another national injunction. We have a series of judges who are, against the unitary power of the president. See the language, the vocabulary.
Yeah.
And if they want to exercise executive power, they should just run for president. But we're not going to allow a federal judge. Well, you were fine when the federal judge was Kaczmarek and he was blocking a woman's right to choose.
Absolutely.
You're okay with the judges in Louisiana blocking COVID policy or acting like they were the commander in chief instead of Joe Biden. You're okay then. You just don't like it when you're on the other side of it. So I think they're not going to stick their noses into that particular thing. And I don't think we'll see what happens on April 4th and a few days later when the Supreme Court finally rules. I just don't see them taking the bait from the Trump administration, who wrote in their brief, in their application, get this, everybody sit down for this one, that every administration for the last over 100 years has gotten the interpretation of the 14th Amendment wrong, including apparently Trump 45. Because he was president once before. Everyone has gotten it wrong. They misread the language about subject to the jurisdiction of the country. See, if you're here temporarily, but by permission, or you're here illegally, you're not really subject to the jurisdiction of this country. How is that? How is that? And by the way, we're talking about the baby. So when the baby gets out, I don't know if people understand how babies work. Maybe because we just had one recently in my family. Yeah. I kind of get it. They don't get out and go, Viva Colombia! They go goo goo gaga, and they're born on soil. That's why we don't deal with having an interview of a baby about what allegiance they have to what foreign power or what jurisdiction. They're just born. Where were you born? Good enough for us. You're a citizen. That's the way it works in this country. And if you don't like it, and obviously MAGA doesn't like it, and they conflate it with the border problem. What's the border problem in Massachusetts? The border between New Hampshire and Massachusetts? The president needs to be able to control the border. We have to be, I don't know, a birth tourism. If you don't like birth tourism and anchor babies, then there's one method for that. Go propose a constitutional amendment, get 2/3 of Congress to approve it, and then get 2/3 of the states to approve it. Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. But why do you think they took the case then? Because it would have been very easy to, if they're not planning on looking at the injunction, if they're not planning on modifying the 14th Amendment with birthright citizenship,
I think they got to kill it.
Circuits are in.
They got to kill it. I think there's two reasons. One, they got 4 votes.
Yeah.
And we know who the 4 votes are. We know that Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Alito, and Thomas thought it was interesting. So you need 4 to take it. They haven't taken it yet. There's a phrase they use in the Supreme Court. They actually use it on the Supreme Court justice about whether something is cert worthy. Ultimately, whether they're going to take the appeal is for another day. This is only about whether they're going to block the injunction or not during the pendency of the merits appeal. And they haven't even decided that yet. It's really just an administrative. It's nothing. They haven't even administratively stated. So they've sided so far with the judges. They haven't administratively stated, which is good. They've said, you know what? It's sort of interesting. Get back to us on April 4th. Let's see your brief. They did the same thing, except with a stay. Remember when we reported on Roberts about U.S. aid?
Yeah.
$2 billion. We were like, he just did an administrative stay until Friday. Then Friday came, because he did a very fast briefing schedule on that. And Friday came, and he took a look at the U.S. aid's brief, and he was like, Yep, I'm not going to block that injunction, that mandatory injunction, pay the $2 billion. Judge Ali, you take over from here. So we were a little bit, we got a little agita when we saw the administrative stay. No administrative stay here. A briefing schedule, way out, not even a schedule. Well, we'll see your brief on April 4th. So I don't think they've taken it. So I'm not concerned yet about it. I think they
Except,
will take it, though. I think they will take it to kill the Trump argument once and for all.
but if they basically undo the injunction, they're saying that Trump administration has a likelihood of success on the merits,
If they do.
Which would mean they kind of are saying that he could change citizenship. So I get what you're saying, that it's administrative, but it still worries me enough. But to your point, and I'm going to hold on to this thought.
There's no stay. There's no stay.
Right. There's no stay. But I'm saying, well, right now, practically, the lower courts have an injunction in place. And the question is, do they undo that or not, the Supreme Court?
Yeah, they're not. So my thought process is, I am encouraged by the fact that there's no stay. Mm-hmm. Not even an administrative one, until we get to April 4th. All they're waiting for is the brief on April 4th. And I think at the end of that brief on April 4th, I think they do not block the injunction. And I think they will let the appeals run their course, and they'll decide for next term whether they're going to take the birthright citizenship 14th Amendment, or you're right, or we're both right. And they go, it is so clear on the nose of the face of the Constitution that we're not going to let an executive order, which we think is the lowest way to legislate or rule by fiat, overcome. We don't agree with the language about jurisdiction, subject to the jurisdiction, and Trump's interpretation of it, changing 100 years of precedent and every presidential position, including his own, over the last 100 years.
I think our only saving grace is only 4 needed to take the case. I'm holding on to hope with that.
Yeah.
Because if it's just them, then, we're okay. So.
All right. So we're going to continue. It'll be fun. April 4th, tune back in. I don't think there'll be an oral argument. I think they'll just be on the papers, and we will cover it. And we're going to continue to cover something to put on our radar screens for our audience is this unitary president model and how much disdain it has for nationwide injunctions, because it empowers federal judges, and they don't want powerful federal judges. That's why we see Donald Trump and his administration bashing law firms. Yep. That's why we see them bashing judges. That's why we see them disrespecting judges again, just as he did as the criminal defendant. And we see and judges are starting to get pissed off and fire back. I'm going to get Judge Ludick back. Because he's starting to stand up for the federal judiciary again, as only he can. Let's switch gears and go to how about gender affirming therapy? And why don't you explain to our audience what has happened? What does it mean to accept the case for the next term? And what do we think it means that they want to stick their noses into this particular issue?
So there is a Colorado law that bans gender conversion therapy regarding a therapist in particular. And so this therapist is saying this violates my First Amendment rights. And interestingly, the group that is bringing this on behalf of the therapist is the same group that represented that Colorado cake maker, if you remember, that went to the Supreme Court saying they couldn't make the cake for a gay wedding.
The phony baker.
The phony baker. It's the
same group. Who never got asked to bake a cake for a gay marriage.
That's true. It was theoretical, right? So it's the same group that is doing this. So, this is not some one-off thing, as they have. This is obviously very strategic. The Supreme Court had a chance to take a conversion ban appeal before about 2 years ago and declined to take it. Why they're taking it now is disappointing. It's essentially the same argument. The therapist is arguing it's a First Amendment violation. She should be able to basically say whatever she wants to her client, right? And it's very similar to the RFK Jr. cases that we have been talking about on this show for quite a while now. If you remember, RFK Jr. was taking these certain COVID cases where the doctors were being suspended or having their license revoked for giving false information regarding COVID. And, these medical boards were saying, you're violating basically your license. It's a similar idea here, because the idea is that you as a therapist could have more restrictions on your speech, right? That's the argument by Colorado. Colorado saying, like, if you were just a friend of the person and you wanted to talk conversion therapy and say whatever you want, like that, you would have a protected First Amendment right. But here with a therapist, there are, let's say, more duties, there are more restrictions allowed because you are a licensed professional. And so we are legislating around your speech as a licensed professional, which gives us more latitude to restrict your speech.
Yeah, I'm always uncomfortable when they take cases and they want to, the transgender community is so under attack right now, so senselessly under attack. You've got Judge Reyes, who I'm sure will end up at the Supreme Court, just tore a new one into the Trump administration, and Pete Hegseth for trying to bounce transgender troops, Americans who happen to be transgender, who are also serving with valor and willing to make the ultimate sacrifice to our country. And Pete Hegseth likes to say things in his books and interviews like, they're untrustworthy, they're liars, they're not good for esprit de corps, they're going to commit suicide more than other people. And the judge was like, what are you even talking about? So transgender community under attack there, transgender community that happens to end up in prison under attack, transgender community, transgender members of Congress under attack. We just had a hearing. It got so bad that a MAGA chair of the hearing thought that another MAGA congressperson went too far to misgender the transgender representative, the person who happens to be transgender from Delaware, and kept calling her Mr. McBride, which was disgusting.
Disgusting.
And, she identifies as a woman, she has children, her state elected her, not when she was a man, but when she was already transgender. Yeah. Identifying as a woman. So who is this a-hole? Sorry, that's a medical legal term. Who is this?
It's right on.
To call her Mr. And it got so bad that even the guy, the parliamentarian, who's chairing, was like, that is beyond the pale. Get a hold of yourself. So now, whenever I see the Supreme Court trying to get into transgender issues and about people who have dysphoria, gender dysphoria, who believe they're in the wrong body, in the wrong gender body, and want to make a change. Like, what can I find the old timey Republicans that used to stay out of my bedroom and stay out? Now they got their hands everywhere they shouldn't. They're in everybody's bedroom. They got their hands up every anatomical part imaginable, and they're supposed to be the party of conservatism and libertarianism. Where is that? It's the Democrats that stand up for people's rights, people's body autonomy and integrity and dignity. That's our party. Yeah. So we're going to have to see what happens. We're going to have to wait a long time. There's going to be briefing in between, but the case is going to be up in the October docket. We're here in March already, just to give people a little bit of a viewer's guide. Normally, the last oral argument is sometime in April. We start getting decisions in May, June, July, all the way up to August, usually around the time of their summer vacation. They try to get out of town and then hit the print button on all these decisions. But with the Trump administration, so out of control. I mean, the one thing that made me chuckle in the filing on birthright citizenship is that they had to acknowledge that in the month of February alone, the Trump administration had more universal national injunctions against it than the first 3 years of the Biden administration.
I saw that. I know.
Well, but I half joked in a hot take. I said it's like the guy that kills his parents and asks for mercy because he's an orphan. You did it.
Yeah.
Maybe you could say a lot of things about Joe Biden, but he wasn't issuing blatantly unconstitutional executive orders challenging the separation of powers on a daily basis. So I don't want to hear them complaining about, we're getting enjoined everywhere. Well, stop acting out and stop lurching us from one. We're lurching from one constitutional crisis to the other. So what I was about to say is normally you and I would do like a final wrap and there'd be like a hiatus over the summer because we'd look at cases coming up, but I'm telling you, stay with unprecedented. There's so many emergency applications that they're going to have to like cancel their trips to the French Riviera. I'm talking about the Supreme Court justice, and I mean the MAGA ones, that we're going to be on the air live talking about live cases through the summer, don't you think?
Oh, I think so, for sure. He's doesn't care about the law. He's being audacious.
Or the calendar.
Or the calendar, for sure. No, just to circle back to the conversion therapy, and for those that kind of were watching us in December, that's when the Supreme Court held oral arguments in whether or not in Tennessee their law banning transgender transition care, non-surgical care can be banned. We had that case. And then we also have the case in Oklahoma where whether or not public tax money can go to Catholic charter schools.
And we don't have the rulings yet.
No, we don't have the rulings yet. And then they're taking this conversion case, which really a lot of states have this law and they have had it for a long time. So the fact that they're taking these really extreme religious right cases is scary, especially when you have the vice president of the United States talking about how we need more babies and we're rolling back reproductive rights. Like they are not only in our bedrooms and our homes trying to help interfere, let's say, with how we want to raise our children. But they are legislating in a way that is rolling back rights to the most vulnerable people in our community. We've talked about this before. I recommend Gracefully Grayson for anybody who's still wondering how a child can feel not like they were born in the right body. It's written from a child's point of view. But it is 5 alarm bells, scary bells here going on with the Supreme Court, with what the Republicans want to do outside the Supreme Court. We love Amy Coney Barrett as our swing vote in most things, but in this area, she's not going to help us. It is a really disturbing time, which sometimes makes us feel powerless, but this is why we do midterms. This is why we get involved in local elections. The Supreme Court is not going to save us from the religious right tsunami that is coming to try to change how we live our lives, even though it is none of their business.
And to be clear, I don't love, and you don't either, Amy Coney Barrett, because she's wrong on so many issues. But I have to recognize, I have eyes. I have to recognize that she's become the swing vote, and we need her on certain things that matter about presidential power. She's completely untrustworthy in terms of reproductive rights or church and state issues or even criminal president issues. Wrong, and more wrong. And it's the sad state of affairs when you and I and our audience have to count on Amy Coney Barrett to bring home the bacon, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Some of these issues. Let's stay with her for a minute.
Yeah.
So Amy Coney Barrett, she didn't roll her eyes, but most people thought she did at the joint session. And she took a lot of flack from MAGA.
Saw that interaction.
Yeah, she took a lot of the meme is out there. The mean meme is out there. And the reality is, you and I have been tracking we were one of the first shows to really talk about it so early because it was imperceptible in the beginning, the move. You had it was like one of these slow motion camera things where to catch a fly being eaten by a bullfrog. You have to takes a while. And it took us a while.
The opposite of what Kavanaugh has done, actually.
Yes.
Because his first year, he voted in the majority every single time. And now, he's nowhere to be found. Yeah.
Gorsuch has gone hard right when we had some hopes that he would be the swing vote. But she, we had to see it. We had to find it. It was like in dissents or snarky little comments back to Alito or Thomas or out and out voting on the other side on issues. She started as kind of softly. It's like, well, I'll join you, but here's my concurrence, and I don't really agree with your thought process or your jurisprudential analysis. And then it went full blown. No, you're wrong, and I'm voting with the 3 ladies over here, right? So that that got it, but it depends on the issue. If you're talking, she's a University of Notre Dame. She's a practicing Catholic. She's got 8 kids, a lot of them adopted. She's the one that said during a discussion about abortion and the Dobbs decision. She's the one that said, well, why can't they just have them and then drop them off at firehouses? I'm like, sorry?
Right.
That may make for a Hallmark movie, but I don't really, right?
It's because she adopted. And I understand, I think the problem with Republicans in general is that they cannot put themselves in the shoes of somebody else because for her, adoption works. So she sees it as a solution to everyone.
That's right.
but you don't know what somebody's solution is going to be. And if you're unwilling to kind of accept that reality, you're always going to see the world as doing what you would have done. And I think that's actually the biggest difference between Democrats and Republicans. We're willing to put the shoes in somebody else, like put ourselves in somebody else's experience, even if we haven't had that lived experience.
Well, look, we're going to continue to watch Amy Coney Barrett. We got 2 big cases coming up that we're going to see. And the lack of continuity of thought issue is going to come up again, because she may be in the right spot for you and me and our audience for birthright citizenship. Maybe we'll see. She may be in the right spot to clip Donald Trump's wings in terms of presidential power, but she's not going to be in the right spot for some other cases that are going to be important to us, and maybe even transgender. And so it's not going to be a consistent voice or vote that we can count on, but we got no choice.
Mm-hmm.
We only have 3
in
the Democratic wing of the Supreme Court, and we got to count to 5. And so we can't count on Gorsuch.
During the oral argument for the transgender case back in December, she kept on harping on parents' rights, which I thought was maybe a glimmer of hope. I don't know if it's going to help in that situation, because the parents weren't the ones suing. And so I think that maybe the parents would have to sue again for like what was at issue was not parent right. I guess I could put it that way.
Yeah.
But it kind of made me, if people frame that argument around parents' rights, because again, this is an issue she finds important. She has 8 kids. Yeah. She wants to raise them how she wants to raise them, right? I got from her that was a way in with her. So hopefully...
we'll see. But MAGA is doing the same thing to her. They did to John McCain, who also adopted a black child from Africa. They made all these scurrilous and scandalous comments about McCain when they didn't like him, about, he had a black mistress and a black baby. Like, are you? And her, they were like, she has children from Haiti. Can't trust her, whatever. Really disgusting. Again, things that our party does not do.
No.
If you're looking for a party. Let's close out our unprecedented. Why don't you give us a quick recap about the big states, Democratic states suing big oil, Chevron, Exxon, and the rest for false advertising about their product, and the impact on the environment and on public health. And what I think the 2 interesting things I'd like you to touch on for the audience, of course, is that this is not a classic appeal jurisdiction for the U.S. Supreme Court, because there's states on both sides suing each other. Red states against blue states, and the jurisdiction of the court in that kind of case, which is different than what people would imagine. And then what the court decided to do about exercising that original jurisdiction or not.
Yeah, so you just said it right there, original jurisdiction. And that's the difference. If 2 states are suing each other, the Supreme Court doesn't wait for, like, let's say, a decision and an appeal, because practically how would that work? Which state Supreme Court would even review it, right? So that's when they have original jurisdiction, which means they see it outright. And what the states here were trying to do, these red states were trying to sue, because California and other blue states are suing these gas and oil companies. We talked about this before in another show, saying, hey, you should be liable for the environmental damage and the health harm caused by our citizens, because you knew that this was going to hurt people's health and the environment, and you lied about it and you hid it. This is very similar to like the tobacco cases or the case against the opiate use, right? Saying you knew about this and you hid it. And it's a lot, they're going to have to prove that in court, these states. They're going to have to prove liability, right? But what this the red attorney generals were trying to say is, hey, blue states, you cannot even sue them, because if you win, it is going to harm us. Our oil prices are going to go up, et cetera, et cetera. So we have standing to stop this. The Supreme Court, 7 out of 9 of them said, no way, you don't have standing to stop it. There's no way the harm you're alleging is even close to enough for standing. Of course, Clarence Thomas was one of the ones who thought that they should take it. And he says that that the red states lawsuit alleged serious constitutional violations. Alito, who actually owns stock in some of the companies at issue here, also just thought the Supreme Court should take the case, but thankfully 7 of them said no. So that the blue states get to go on. This is also very similar. If you remember, Texas, the current Solicitor General under Trump was the lawyer for Texas who tried to get the Supreme Court to force Michigan to do like yet another recount because they were alleging back in 2020 that Trump really won. And the Supreme Court was like, you have absolutely no standing to try to force Michigan to do anything. And they dismissed that outright. So this seems to be like a little bit of a powder, and the red states are trying to get the Supreme Court to step in, but so far they failed.
Yeah. And I think just back for the little tutorial for a minute. So it's not an appeal. It's when the Supreme Court actually sits as almost like a trial court and lets the first set of briefing. See, normally in an appeal, the appellate courts, the record is developed. We call it the record, literally. The record is developed below. All facts, all evidence, all testimony, all documents developed by the trial court judge. In fact, although I've been in oral arguments at an appellate level where they've wanted to go outside of the record, which they're not supposed to do, and ask questions that they found interesting, but they're supposed to. It's supposed to be a dead record, a cold record. By the time it gets to an appellate court, they don't take testimony at an appellate court. They don't have people testify. It's oral argument, which is literally argument of lawyers and briefing of lawyers at that point, citing back to the record. And that's what the judges at the appellate level, they can't get behind that. They can't get beyond it. If they would like to have known something, but it wasn't properly developed in the record, generally they'll just say, I can't make a ruling based on that. If they think it needed to be developed in the record, they'll send the case back down before they make their decision to the trial court level with instructions on what to do. That's the appellate thing. And the same thing at the Supreme Court level. Although increasingly with this MAGA right-wing Supreme Court, they don't care what the record is. They don't care what the lower judge's decision is. They don't care what the standard of review is. They reverse engineer it. They want to reach a decision, and they don't want to get as soon as I hear Alito or Thomas or Gorsuch or one of them say, let's not get bogged down in the record, or the facts are messy. It's like, wait a minute, you're an appellate court. You're not supposed to be making advisory opinions. If that were the case, why don't we eliminate courts altogether, lower courts altogether, and you can just sit up on high like a star chamber and tell us what you think. So we don't do that. So that's the normal appellate process. In this unique situation where it's state versus state or state versus a country, the Supreme Court steps in and acts like the trial court. They're not on appeal. It's original jurisdiction. It's one of the rare places they're allowed to hear from the Constitution. And they say, okay, so then they take testimony, affidavits, and records and things that you would never do as an appellate court. But you have to decide to exercise your original jurisdiction. And they're very miserly about doing that because they don't want to take these cases all the time. So they get to thumb up or thumb down. They control their own docket, appellate and original. And they were like, 7 out of the 9 were like, this case continues. We're not gonna interfere with the case that's been brought. Because this was just MAGA. Remember, Trump is in the pocket of big oil.
Yeah, for sure.
He literally begged them for $1 billion in a now infamous Mar-a-Lago meeting and said, support me over Kamala, give me $1 billion, and I'll basically give you my administration. I mean, he said it. They had a chopped steak dinner, one of the cheapest dinners I've ever heard of, at Mar-a-Lago, where they handed out PowerPoints to Big Oil. It was hosted by the Petroleum Institute, which is Big Oil's, bullshit lobby group, controlled by Big Oil. And they ended up giving several $100 million to Donald Trump all the way through the inauguration in order to buy a presidency in plain sight. So the states are like, he just got the red states to step in to try to oppose the blue states without jurisdiction and standing to argue, oh no, you can't. The courts will now decide blue states versus Big Oil, and whether they state a claim, they make a claim, and if they did, how much money is at stake. And I'll tell you, you're pumping up lawyers here for a minute at the end of the show because they get an unnecessary bad rap, especially with the president that we have. The lawyers, the plaintiffs' lawyers that are handling this case, a lot of them cut their teeth in the tobacco cases where they brought low big tobacco. And they're using it's the same brilliant lawyers, the same brilliant approach, the same, they got the band back together again to go after big oil. And big oil should be worried and shaking in their boots, because those plaintiffs' lawyers did a masterful job in bringing down big tobacco. Anybody's interested in that world, they should go watch The Insider, the movie from about 20 years ago with the Russell Crowe, where he played. It's a real story about somebody who was a whistleblower from a big tobacco company, and 60 Minutes was involved. It was a whole big thing. But you'll see some of the Texas lawyers that were involved in big tobacco towards the end of that movie, and it's the same group from Houston and Texas and everything that are going after big oil, and they should, for what they've alleged. We're at the end of the show. Dina, I always love giving you the final word. Get ready. Here it comes. What do you got?
Just now, something brilliant. I'm so glad we're on this road. And I kind of said it in the beginning, but I'm grateful to be part of a community that's not giving up hope, who's more motivated than ever, we're just diving in. We're doing everything we can. And so I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, always great to compliment there's a togetherness about our audience. Even though it can be lonely, what you and I do, staring at a computer screen and at a microphone in a room by ourselves for hours on end, knowing who I'm speaking to and knowing the reaction or appreciating the reaction, and the fact that how fierce the commitment to justice, rule of law, our show, our building, our audience is. It gives me the pep in my step that I need to do my work every day. Really does. Yeah. And I'm glad I'm doing it with you. We'll see you next week. And of course, get you back to doing hot takes here on Legal AF. In the meantime, you've got Dina Doll and Michael Popok signing off for Unprecedented, only on the Legal AF YouTube channel. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.